During a family toast, my granddaughter laughed. She's only alive because she's too bitter to die. I raised my glass and left something in her wine she never stopped tasting. That moment, and all eyes turned to me. I could see the mix of shock and awkward amusement on their faces. Some guests gasped. Others lowered their eyes, suddenly finding the pattern on the tablecloth fascinating. But what cut deeper than the words themselves was seeing my son Thomas's barely concealed smile. I'm Eleanor Blackwell, and this was supposed to be my 70th birthday celebration. The crystal champagne flute trembled slightly in my weathered hand as I held it high. 70 years. 7 decades of life, of love, and of giving everything I had to this family. And this was my reward. It's a family, I said calmly, my voice steadier than my heart. And to truth, that eventually comes to light. I took a delicate sip, watching my granddaughter Melissa's smug expression over the rim of my glass. At 25, she was the perfect image of entitlement that her parents had cultivated.
Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching.
Her designer dress probably cost more than what most people at the table made in a week. I had paid for her college education. I had bought her first car. I had been there for every milestone, every triumph, every failure. And now, to her, I was just a bitter old woman who refused to die. Victoria. My daughter Lel gave a forced laugh and quickly raised her glass. To Eleanor, she exclaimed, trying to smooth over the moment. Happy birthday, Mother. The way she said mother had always sounded like a slur. Thomas followed with his own toast, his words flowing with practiced charm. To my mother, who has always been persistent. More awkward laughter, more glasses raised half-heartedly. I smiled. Not the warm smile of a happy woman celebrating 7 decades of life, but the knowing smile of someone who has finally seen through the facade. After dinner, the edge of the marble counter as I steadied myself, breathing deeply. The caterers had left everything prepared. The cake waited on a silver platter. 70 candles arranged meticulously in a spiral. My reflection in the stainless steel refrigerator door showed a woman I barely recognized, hair perfectly styled in a silver bob. Pearls gleaming at my neck, a designer dress that Victoria had helped me choose. Are you all right, Gran? I turned to find Luke, my 16-year-old grandson, standing in the doorway. Unlike his sister Melissa, Luke had always been observant, thoughtful. Fine, dear, I said, straightening my shoulders. Just getting a moment of quiet. He stepped into the kitchen, closing the door behind him. What Melissa said was cruel. Dad should have said something. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the discomfort, the embarrassment he felt on my behalf. Your father has made his choices, Luke, as has your sister. They talk about you, you know? When they think I'm not listening, he hesitated, then added, about the house, about how you should be in a community where you can be taken care of. I wasn't surprised. The signs had been there for months, Thomas and Victoria's sudden increased interest in my well-being, the brochures for senior living facilities that mysteriously appeared on my coffee table. The casual mentions of how much my house must be worth in the current market. And what do you think, Luke? I asked, meeting his gaze. I think they forget who paid off their mortgage when Dad lost his job 5 years ago. He shrugged. I think they forget a lot of things, smart boy, observant. Like I said, the kitchen door swung open, and Victoria appeared, her smile tight. Everyone's waiting for the cake, Mother. Luke, go join your sister. She's taking photos for Instagram. Luke gave me a look, a small, almost imperceptible nod before slipping past his mother. Victoria's smile disappeared the moment he left. Thomas and I need to talk to you. It's about time we discussed your situation, my situation. As if 70 years of life had been reduced to a problem that needed solving. Of course, I replied pleasantly. I'd been wanting to talk to you both as well. Something in my tone must have caught her off guard because her perfectly Botoxed forehead attempted to wrinkle in confusion. Mother, she began, but I cut her off by lifting the cake. Let's not keep everyone waiting, I said, my voice sweet. as the frosting on the elaborate cake I'd paid for. Would be a shame to let these candles go to waste. As I carried my own birthday cake out to the dining room where my family waited, some with genuine affection, others with barely disguised impatience, I thought about Thomas and Victoria's mounting gambling debts, about the second mortgage they'd taken out on their house, about the documents I'd found while babysitting Luke last month, carelessly left in Thomas's home office. I thought about Melissa's cruel words and the lifetime of sacrifices that had culminated in that single, revealing moment. I thought about the appointment I'd made with my lawyer for Monday morning at 70. I had finally learned a valuable lesson. Family isn't always defined by blood, and love isn't always returned in kind. "Make a wish, Mother," Victoria called out as Thomas dimmed the lights. 70 candles glowed before me, illuminating the faces of those gathered around. I drew in a deep breath, my eyes meeting Luke's across the flickering light. I didn't need to wish for clarity. I already had that. Didn't need to wish for strength. 70 years had given me plenty. Know what I wished for, as I blew out those 70 candles in one determined breath, was something far more valuable. I wished for justice. The morning after my birthday party, I sat at my kitchen table, a cup of tea growing cold between my hands. The house was quiet, no forced laughter, no whispered conversations that stopped when I entered the room. No Melissa's sharp eyes, assessing the value of everything I owned, just silence and sunlight streaming through windows. I had cleaned myself for 50 years. This house, my sanctuary. The home Robert and I had purchased when Thomas was just a baby. The mortgage had been terrifying back then. Robert's teacher's salary and my part-time bookkeeping work barely covered it. Permanent, something that would remain long after we were gone. Robert had been gone for 5 years now. Cancer took him quickly. At least a small mercy after watching my mother linger for years with Alzheimer's. I stirred my tea, watching the amber liquid swirl. Last night's confrontation with Thomas and Victoria had gone exactly as I'd expected. "Mother, we're concerned," Thomas had said, his voice practiced with false sincerity. We sat in my living room, the remnants of the party cleared away by the catering staff I'd paid for. Victoria nodded, perched beside him on my sofa. "You're alone in this big house? What if something happened? What if you fell?" "I have my alert bracelet," I said, tapping the discreet band on my wrist. "That's not enough, Mother. I've been looking at some wonderful communities. Scenic views, social activities, medical staff on call. And your house would sell for quite a bit in this market," Victoria added, unable to keep the eagerness from her voice. "It's more than enough to cover the entry fee for Sunrise Gardens and have plenty left over." Left over for whom, I wondered? Thomas to cover his gambling debts, for Victoria's monthly spa retreats, for Melissa's designer wardrobe. "I appreciate your concern," I had replied calmly. Victoria's smile had tightened. "We're just trying to help, Mother. Sometimes older people don't realize when it's time to make a change." Older people. As if my 7 decades of life experience had rendered me incapable rather than wiser. In the morning light, I opened the folder I'd taken from my bedroom safe. Inside were bank statements, loan documents, and records of every financial gift I'd given Thomas and his family over the years. $45,000 to cover the second mortgage when Thomas's investment scheme failed. $28,000 for Melissa's first year of teams. College. $32,000 when Victoria needed emergency surgery and their insurance wouldn't cover it. $15,000. For Luke's medical bills after his asthma hospitalization. The list went on and on. Nearly $200,000 over 15 years. Money from Robert's life insurance. Money from selling our vacation cabin in Vermont. Money I'd saved by working part-time well into my 60s. None of it legally documented as loans. Given with the trust of a mother who believed family took care of each other. I sipped my now cold tea, remembering the day Thomas came to me, desperate and ashamed, confessing that he'd lost his job and they were 3 months behind on their consulate spas, and were low months behind on their mortgage. "They're going to foreclose, Mom," he'd said, eyes downcast. "We have nowhere else to go. I'd written the check that same day. No questions asked, no repayment terms discussed. We'll pay you back, he'd promised. As soon as I'm back on my feet, I'd found another job within a month better paying than the last. Their lifestyle never changed. The promised repayment never materialized. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Luke's name flashed on the caller ID. Gran, his voice was hushed. Are you okay? Fine. Fine. Sweetheart, thank you for checking. I heard them talking after they got home last night about the house. I wasn't surprised. What did they say? Dad said they need to accelerate the timeline, that they can't wait for you to come around. Any more? He paused. Gran, I think they're really in trouble. I found some papers in Dad's office. From Sunset Loans. The interest rate is crazy, like loan shark, crazy. My heart sank. So it was worse than I thought. Not just casino debts, but predatory lenders. Luke, listen to me. Don't get involved. Don't let them know what you've seen. But, Gran, no buts. This isn't your problem to solve. I kept my voice gentle but firm. But if you could do something for me, anything, those papers, could you take pictures of them, without your parents knowing? He didn't hesitate. Already did. I'll send them to you, smart boy. So, much like Robert, it made my heart ache. Be careful, Luke, and thank you. After we hung up, I sat motionless for several minutes. The weight of the situation settled around me like a heavy blanket. Thomas wasn't just after my house out of casual greed. He was desperate. Desperate people do desperate things. I reached for my phone and scrolled to a number I hadn't called in years. Carolyn Green had been my friend since college, through marriages, children, and widowhood. She'd also been a family lawyer for 40 years before retiring. Eleanor. Caroline, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I need your advice. Professional advice. And a great deal of money that was never repaid. Another pause. I'll be there in 30 minutes. His smile was genuine then, his eyes bright, with promise and gratitude. My boy, my only child. When had he changed? When had money and status replaced love and respect? Or had I simply been blind to who he truly was all along? The coffee began to drip, filling the kitchen with its rich aroma. Outside, a cardinal landed on the bird feeder Robert had built decades ago. Party, like a son who saw his mother as an obstacle rather than a person, like a woman of 70 who finally understood that. Sometimes the greatest act of love is setting boundaries that should have been established long ago. The doorbell rang. Caroline, my oldest friend. My first step toward reclaiming what was mine, not just my financial security, but my dignity. As I moved to answer the door, I caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror. I straightened my shoulders and lifted my chin. Eleanor Blackwell. Wasn't bitter. She was finally awake. They want you declared incompetent, Carolyn said bluntly, setting down her coffee cup. We sat at my kitchen table, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the documents spread between us. My stomach clenched, but I wasn't entirely surprised. On what grounds? Caroline adjusted her reading glasses and lifted a legal pad with her notes. Oh. Luke's photos were quite revealing. According to these documents, Thomas has been consulting with Dr. Winters about your increasing confusion and paranoid tendencies. Dr. Winters, my primary physician for 15 years. The betrayal stung. Months ago, he said I was in excellent health for my age. Caroline tapped the paper. These are fabrications, Eleanor. Dangerous ones. I took a deep breath. So Thomas is setting the groundwork to have me declared mentally incompetent. Then he could control my assets, sell my house, and pay off his. Gambling debts. Caroline's mouth set in a grim line. The loan documents Luke photographed show Thomas owes nearly $300,000 to some very unsavory characters. The kind who don't accept late payments. The magnitude of it washed over me. This wasn't just about greed or convenience. It was desperation. My son was drowning, and instead of asking for help, he decided to sacrifice me. What are my options? First, we need to establish your mental competency beyond any doubt. Comprehensive evaluations with independent doctors who have no connection. To Thomas or Dr. Winters. I nodded. And then we document everything. Every penny you've given them. Every conversation about your house. She paused, and we need to move quickly. They're planning to have you evaluated within the next month. Luke will be in danger if Thomas discovers he's helping me. Not physically, but he depends. On them, he's only 16. I rubbed my temples. Thomas and Victoria control his college fund, his future. Then we protect Luke too. I know a family court judge who might be sympathetic if we need to establish a separate trust for his education. A heavy knock at the front door interrupted us. Through the sidelight window, I could see Thomas's BMW in my driveway. "It's Thomas," I said quietly. "Quick, gather everything." Carolyn efficiently slid the documents into her portfolio while I moved toward the door, schooling my features into a neutral expression. Thomas stood on my porch, his smile too broad, too practiced. Behind him, Victoria waited in the passenger seat of the car, sunglasses hiding her eyes. "Mother, I was just in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by." His gaze slid past me, registering Caroline's presence in the kitchen. A flicker of something concern, suspicion, crossed his face. "I didn't realize you had company. Carolyn and I were just catching up." I stepped aside. "Would you like to come in?" He hesitated, clearly recalculating. "Actually, I can't stay long. Victoria and I are heading to a charity function." He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a glossy brochure. "I brought you this. It's for Sunset Gardens." I accepted. The brochure, with what I hoped looked like genuine interest. "You seem different today." I smiled. "I'm perfectly fine. Just enjoying some time with an old friend, right?" His eyes narrowed slightly. "Caroline Green, Dad's old friend." The emphasis wasn't lost on me. Thomas had always been jealous of Robert's friendships, especially the ones I maintained after his death. "My friend, too," I corrected gently. "For over 50 years now." Thomas checked his watch. "Well, I should get going. Victoria gets anxious waiting in the car." He leaned in, kissing my cheek with cool formality. "Think about Sunset Gardens, Mother. We only want what's best for you." "I know exactly what you want, Thomas," I said, my voice honey-sweet, "and I'm giving it careful consideration." Something in my tone made him pause, studying my face with newfound attention. Then he nodded curtly and returned to his car. I watched them drive away, Victoria's head turning to look. Back at my house, as they reached the corner, assessing its value, perhaps, imagining it empty of my presence. "He's suspicious," Carolyn said when I returned. "First, we secure your financial accounts, change your passwords, set up two-factor authentication. Then we schedule those medical evaluations tomorrow, if possible." I nodded. "Should speak with Luke. Warn him to be careful." Discreetly. No calls to the house phone, no texts that Thomas or Victoria might see. He has basketball practice tomorrow after school. Could meet him there. Caroline looked up from her notes. "Eleanor, are you prepared for how ugly this might get?" "Thomas won't give up easily. There could be a formal competency hearing. You might have to testify against your own son, who had worked 3 jobs to put him through college, who had believed until his dying day that our son would make us proud." I thought of Melissa's cruel toast, of Victoria's calculating eyes, of the carefully constructed trap they had set for me, and I thought of Luke, caught in the middle, trying to do the right thing despite the examples set by his parents. I refused to be sacrificed to save him from his own choices. Carolyn nodded. "Then we fight, and Eleanor, we win." As she continued outlining our strategy, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. For decades, I had been the supportive mother, the generous mother-in-law, the doting grandmother. I had given and given, expecting nothing in return except basic respect and affection. Now I would become something else entirely. A woman who refused to be victimized by the very people she had sacrificed for. Outside my window, shadows lengthened. Across the garden Robert and I had planted together decades ago. The roses he'd loved were just beginning to bloom. I intended to be here to see them reach their full glory. The high school gymnasium echoed with the squeak of basketball shoes and the hollow bounce of balls against polished floors. I sat in the bleachers, a carefully casual figure in slacks and a light sweater. Watching as Luke ran drills with his teammates, I'd arrived 10 minutes before practice ended. Just another grandmother watching her grandson play. No one would think twice about my presence here. As the coach blew the final whistle, Luke's eyes found mine. He gave an almost imperceptible nod before heading to the locker room. I waited, patiently flipping through a magazine I'd brought as cover. 20 minutes later, Luke emerged with damp hair and his gym bag slung over one shoulder. He approached casually, sitting beside me on the bleachers. "'Kay, Gran," he said, loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. Then, lowering his voice, "Dad's been asking questions about yesterday, about why Caroline was at your house." My pulse quickened, but I kept my expression neutral. "What did you tell him? That I didn't know anything? That maybe she was just visiting?" He glanced around nervously. He didn't believe me. He called Dr. Winters right after, exactly as Carolyn had predicted. Thomas was accelerating his timeline. "Luke, I need you to listen carefully. Your father's in serious financial trouble." "The gambling," he said flatly. "I know, I've known for a while." The maturity in his voice startled me. How long had he been carrying this knowledge, protecting this secret that wasn't his to keep? "We're taking precautions," I continued quietly. "Legal precautions. But I'm worried about you. If your parents suspect you're helping me, I can handle it, Gran." His jaw set in a stubborn line that reminded me painfully of Robert. "They're wrong. What they're doing to you is wrong. I know, sweetheart, but they're still your parents, and you're still a minor. They control your future." Luke's expression hardened. "Not if I have anything to say about it." "That's exactly what we're working on. Caroline's talking to a judge about setting up a trust for your college education money your parents can't touch." He looked at me sharply. "With what? Your money? It was always going to be your money, Luke. I just need to make sure it gets to you, not to loan sharks or gambling debts." He shook his head, clearly uncomfortable. "This isn't about me, Gran. About both of us." I squeezed his hand. "We're going to protect each other." A car horn honked from the parking lot Victoria, right on time to pick up Luke. "She can't see us talking like this," Luke muttered. "She'd tell Dad." I nodded. "Go. But remember, be careful what you say at home. Don't access any of the photos you took on devices your parents might check. And if you need to reach me, use the prepaid phone I left in your gym locker." His eyebrows rose in surprise. "I was a teenager once, too," I said with a small smile. "I know all about hiding things in gym lockers." Luke grabbed his bag and stood. "I'll text you if I hear anything." Then, loudly for anyone who might be watching, "Thanks for coming to practice, Gran. See you Sunday for dinner." I watched him jog toward Victoria's SUV, every inch the normal teenager greeting his mother after practice. No one would suspect he was part of a carefully orchestrated counter-conspiracy against his own parents. 3 days later, I sat in Dr. Elliot Chen's office, waiting for the results of my comprehensive neurological and cognitive evaluation. Carolyn sat beside me, her legal pad ready. Dr. Chen, a neurologist with no connection to Dr. Winters or anyone in my family's social circle, entered with a folder of test results. "Mrs. Blackwell," he began, his manner direct but kind, "I've reviewed all your test results, and I can state unequivocally that you show no signs of cognitive impairment or dementia. Your memory function is excellent for a woman of your age, honestly excellent for someone 20 years younger." Relief flooded through me, though I hadn't truly doubted the outcome. "And the psychological evaluation?" Caroline asked. "Dr. Patel's assessment indicates no paranoid tendencies, no delusional thinking, and no mood disorders." He removed his glasses. In fact, Mrs. Blackwell scored exceptionally well on tests measuring emotional resilience and adaptive coping strategies. Caroline made notes, nodding with satisfaction. And you'd be willing to testify to these findings, if necessary? Absolutely. Dr. Chen's expression turned serious. Mrs. Blackwell, given what you've told me about your circumstances, I'm concerned about the records from your previous physician. What Dr. Winters documented is contradicted by every objective measure we've taken today. That's precisely what we needed to establish, Carolyn said, closing her notebook. Thank you, doctor. Later, as we left the medical building, Caroline laid out the next steps. We file these results with the family court, we secure your financial accounts, and we wait. Wait? The word felt wrong in my mouth. For what? For Thomas to make his move. Caroline's eyes were sharp with strategy. Now that we know what he's planning, we let him walk right into it. You think he'll still try to have me declared incompetent? Even after these evaluations. He's desperate, Eleanor. People who are cornered rarely see clearly. She checked her watch. Now, about Luke's trust fund. Judge Martinez has agreed to meet with us tomorrow. I've already drafted the paperwork. Evening, alone in my house, I moved methodically from room to room, taking inventory. 50 years of memories inhabited these walls. Robert's books still lined the shelves in his study. The china cabinet held the set my mother had passed down to me. The hall closet contained winter coats that hadn't been worn in years, but that I couldn't bear to part with. This wasn't just real estate to be liquidated. This was my life. My phone buzzed with a text from the prepaid number I'd given Luke. Dad on phone with Dr. Winters, arguing, said something about getting a second opinion. And she can't be evaluated by someone else. So Thomas had discovered my independent medical evaluation. Good. Let him see that I wasn't as passive as he'd assumed. I texted back. Thank you. Be careful. Delete these messages. 3 dots appeared then. Always am. Love you, Gran. A lump formed in my throat. Love. You too. I settled into my favorite chair by the window, watching darkness fall over the neighborhood where I'd lived most of my adult life. The Petersons' lights were on next door. Their grandchildren were visiting. I could hear the faint shriek of delight as children played in the backyard. Thomas had played in our yard once, his laughter just as free, just as innocent. When had he changed? When had money become more important than family, than integrity? My phone rang Thomas's number. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message. Mother, we need to talk. I know you've been seeing other doctors behind my back. This is exactly the kind of paranoid behavior I'm worried about. Call me back, please. His voice held a note of controlled panic. The tone of a man watching his carefully constructed plan begin to crumble. I deleted the message without returning the call. Let him wonder. Let him worry. For 70 years, I had been Eleanor the peacekeeper, Eleanor the giver, Eleanor the silent supporter. Now I was Eleanor the strategist, and I was just getting started. Are you certain? I asked, hand hovering over the document. Caroline met my gaze. Eleanor, you've spent decades giving Thomas everything. There's no obligation to continue. The revised will was significant, but fair, not vindictive, just protective. And Luke's trust is secure, completely. Thomas and Victoria cannot access those funds. Caroline tapped another document. Luke will receive half the house proceeds if you sell, and Melissa. You're still leaving her grandmother's jewelry and a modest gift, more than generous. The pen felt heavy as I signed. When I reached the final page, memories of Thomas as a little boy flashed through my mind, his small hand in mine, his gapped smile. He's still my son, I whispered. Yes, Caroline said gently. And nothing prevents you from helping him in the future if you choose, but it will be your choice, not his demand. I signed the last page. Carolyn notarized the will. About the family. Dinner on Sunday. I'm still hosting it, I confirmed. Thomas doesn't know about the changes. And you're sure you want to tell them there? I smiled thinly. I'm counting on it. Sunday arrived bright and clear. I spent the morning preparing Thomas's favorite pot roast. Let him enjoy one last meal in the house he thought would soon be his. Luke entered first, giving me a quick hug and whispering, "You okay?" I nodded reassuringly. Thomas and Victoria followed with practiced smiles. Melissa arrived last, 20 minutes late as usual. "Something smells good," Thomas said. "Your pot roast. Your favorite," I confirmed, watching him settle into Robert's old place at the table. During dinner, Thomas kept steering the conversation toward my house. The Petersons' place sold for a fortune. He mentioned, "This neighborhood has really appreciated." As dessert was served, I noticed Thomas exchanged glances with Victoria. They were making their move. "Mother," Thomas began, "we're concerned about you being alone in this big house." "We all are," Victoria added. "Mrs. Wilson from your bridge club fell and broke her hip. Living alone at your age is risky." I took a deliberate bite of pie before responding. "How thoughtful. We've found a wonderful assisted living community. They have an opening next month." "Next month?" I repeated. "How convenient." Something in my tone made Thomas pause. "We've spoken with Dr. Winters," Victoria added. "He agrees it's best for someone in your condition." "My condition." I set down my fork. "And what condition would that be? You've been forgetting things?" "Getting confused. Last week you called me Robert." "A complete fabrication, did I?" I asked mildly. "And there's the paranoia. Hiding mail, changing your phone number, seeing doctors without telling us." "Shh." I smiled. "Not paranoia, Thomas. Precaution." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I've been aware of your plans." I retrieved a folder from the sideboard. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Thomas paled. Victoria's smile froze. I laid documents on the table. Comprehensive evaluations, conducted by independent experts with no connection to Dr. Winters, who has agreed to meet with the Medical Ethics Board about the falsified records. "What falsified records?" Thomas sputtered. "The ones suggesting I have dementia. The ones to have me declared incompetent." I slid another document across. "This is your text. Dr. W on board says he'll document memory issues. Should be enough for guardianship hearing." "You had no right to access my messages," Thomas said dangerously. "Actually," Carolyn said, entering. "From the kitchen, when those messages constitute evidence of elder abuse, they become relevant legal evidence." Thomas stood abruptly. "What is she doing here?" "It's providing legal counsel," Caroline replied. "Please sit down. Mother, you're clearly not well. Your mother scored in the 95th percentile for cognitive function." Caroline interrupted. "There is no basis for questioning her competency." I placed one last document on the table. My revised will, executed this week. Thomas sank back into his chair. "Changes, I've removed you as executor. Caroline will serve in that capacity. I've established a trust for Luke that you cannot access. And I've adjusted the distribution of assets." "What does that mean?" Victoria demanded. "My house will no longer automatically pass to Thomas. If I sell, half goes to Luke's trust." "You can't do this," Thomas whispered. "I already have." I closed the folder. "Now, would anyone like coffee with their pie?" The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the soft clink of my spoon against china as I stirred sugar into my coffee. Thomas stared at the documents before him, face ashen. Victoria's hand trembled visibly as she reached for her water glass. Melissa sat frozen for once without a cutting remark. Only Luke moved, rising to help me serve coffee with a barely concealed smile of approval. "This is ridiculous," Thomas finally said, voice strained. "You can't just change everything because of some paranoid delusion. It's not a delusion if it's happening." "Thomas," Caroline interjected calmly, "the text messages, the falsified medical records, the urgent timeline for the assisted living facility that coincidentally aligns perfectly with your loan repayment deadline." Victoria's head snapped up. What loan deadline? Thomas, what is she talking about? So Victoria hadn't been fully informed. Interesting. Thomas ignored her, focusing his attention on me. Mother, we can work this out. As a family. We are working it out, I replied, passing Luke a slice of pie. These documents simply ensure that any future arrangements are made with full transparency and my complete consent. What loan? Victoria repeated, her voice rising. Thomas shot her a warning look. Not now. I believe your wife deserves to know that the assisted living plan wasn't about my welfare, but about your gambling debts, I said evenly. About the $300,000 you owe to Sunset Loans, ironically similar to the name of that retirement community you selected. Victoria's face drained of color. $300,000. But you told me it was only $50,000. The layers of deception were unraveling rapidly now. I almost felt sorry for Victoria almost. Perhaps you should all go home and discuss this privately, Caroline suggested, though her tone made it clear it wasn't really a suggestion. Thomas slammed his hand on the table, rattling the dishes. This isn't over, Mother. Actually, it is, I replied, my voice steady. Unless you'd like Carolyn to share the evidence of your conspiracy with the district attorney rather than just the medical board. Luke stood taller beside me, a silent sentinel. His presence seemed to deflate Thomas further. Thomas, Victoria, I suggest you leave now, Caroline said firmly. Melissa, you too. Melissa, who had been scrolling through her phone with affected disinterest, looked up in surprise at being addressed directly. Whatever. This family is so dysfunctional. She stood, not bothering to push in her chair. P birthday or whatever. Grandmother. Thomas and Victoria rose slowly, gathering their things in taut silence. At the door, Thomas turned. You'll regret this, Mother. I met his gaze calmly. I already regret many things, Thomas. It's the years I spent enabling you. It's the money I gave that fueled your addiction rather than helped you overcome it. But this, I gestured to the documents still on the table. This I will never regret. After they left, Luke helped me clear the table, working quietly alongside me as Caroline organized her papers. Are you okay, Gran? He asked finally, loading the dishwasher the way I'd taught him years ago. I am, I said, surprised to realize it was true. And you? This can't have been easy. He shrugged, his lanky teenage frame suddenly looking older, more substantial. They haven't been parents to me in a long time. Not real ones. I squeezed his shoulder, recognizing the truth in his words. Thomas and Victoria had been too consumed with appearances, with status, with the next scheme to notice their son growing into a remarkable young man. You're welcome to stay here tonight, I offered. The guest room is always ready. He nodded. I'd like that. Dad will be difficult. Carolyn closed her briefcase with a decisive click. I should go. Eleanor, I'll call you tomorrow. Luke, if your parents give you any trouble, call me immediately. After she left, Luke and I sat on the back porch, watching fireflies emerge in the gathering dusk. The garden Robert and I had planted stretched before us, a testament to years of careful tending. What happens now? Luke asked after a while. Now we live on our terms, I replied. I stay in my home as long as I choose to. You finish high school knowing your education is secure. And your parents, they make their own choices. 3 weeks later, Thomas called, his voice subdued. Mother, can we talk? We met at a coffee shop, neutral territory. He looked haggard. The confident facade cracked. Victoria's left me, he said without preamble. Taken Melissa and moved in with her sister. I sipped my tea, waiting. The loan sharks are threatening legal action. I could lose everything. I see. He stared into his untouched coffee. I need help, Mother. The old Eleanor would have reached for her checkbook immediately. The new Eleanor set down her cup carefully. Right. Kind of help, Thomas? He looked up, surprised by the question. Money, of course. And what would you do with it? He blinked. Pay off the debts. Get back on my feet. Without addressing the gambling addiction that created those debts in the first place. His mouth opened, then closed. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, Thomas seemed to actually hear me. He faltered. I don't know how to stop. Simple admission, yet more honest than anything he'd said to me in years. There's a renowned addiction treatment center in Minnesota, I said. I've already spoken with them. They have a place for you, starting next week. You knew I'd come to you. I hoped you would. Not for money, but for real help. He was silent for a long time, turning his coffee cup slowly. And if I go, will you? Will you help with the loans? I'll help you recover, Thomas. Program costs are covered. And afterward, if you stay with treatment, we can discuss a structured repayment plan for your debts, one that you'll participate in and be accountable for. This time, my help would come with conditions, with boundaries, with respect for both of us. And if I don't go, then you'll handle your difficulties on your own as an adult. But you should know that Luke is asked to live with me for his senior year. I've consulted an attorney about that as well. Thomas's shoulders slumped. He hates me. He's disappointed in you. There's a difference. My son looked up, his eyes meeting mine directly for what felt like the first time in decades. I said cruel things to you, Mother. I was going to. He stopped. I know what you were going to do. I'm sorry, he whispered. Simple words, yet I'd waited years to hear them. Flight leaves Sunday, I said, sliding a folder across the table. Luke and I will drive you to the airport. 2 months later, I sat in my garden enjoying the late summer blooms. Luke lounged nearby, reading a college brochure. My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas, day 60 of treatment, his longest period of sobriety in years. The road ahead wouldn't be simple. Thomas's recovery was just beginning. Victoria remained distant. Melissa was still Melissa. But as I watched a monarch butterfly dance among my roses, I felt a profound sense of peace. At 70, I had finally learned that love without boundaries isn't love at all. That sometimes the greatest gift we can give our children is the chance to face their own choices, their own consequences, and that it's never too late to raise a glass in a different kind of toast, not to bitterness, but to truth.